happy to get back, obviously, to have the trip that we had to Vegas and play the teams and play in a variety of ways, coming from behind, trying to hang on to a lead, fighting back against St. Mary's. This group, and I've said it many times, has been extremely delightful to coach. We make mistakes, but they play so hard and they enjoy being around each other. So I think that was a good learning experience for them, and we grew over the weekend or over the week. We came back yesterday, started practice in preparation for Georgia Tech, and obviously we use today and tomorrow before we head down to Atlanta. So looking forward to that. A really good Georgia Tech team, watching them on film. Obviously a familiar name on their staff, and Julian Schwartz that played here. And like I said, just a really good team, talented players. Looking forward to a different type of challenge on Wednesday night.
Questions? Jeff?
Greg, you guys said before the season that guys like Chucky and Lauren Bowman would have to learn some things as the season has gone on. What have they learned so far about the college game, and what, if anything, has your staff learned about them, what you've seen for these first few games?
I think I'll answer the second part first, Jeff. I think the one thing our staff has learned is that they're really resilient. I mean, I mentioned we make mistakes. They understand now, don't go under ball screens in college. They understand Coach Gard wants you to take care of the ball, don't throw it around. But they're really resilient. If they have a miscue, they bounce right back, and they take coaching and want to learn and want to be better. And they're both very team oriented. They'll do whatever they can to help their team win. And I think that's kind of been throughout the team. I've seen that nobody really cares about individual accolades or stats. They just want to do whatever they can to help their team win.
Abby?
You talked about it a little bit, but I was wondering if you could touch more on what stands out about Georgia Tech specifically as you head into Wednesday.
Yeah, well, it'll be the first time this group has faced the Princeton offense, so it's going to challenge a lot of our defensive discipline, following rules, all those type of things. Obviously, we as a staff have coached against it, and we've actually implemented sprinkles of it into what we do, but that'll be the one big challenge. They also will mix their defenses. They use a traditional 1-3-1 and a little bit of a matchup 1-3-1 along with their man-to-man. So just making sure we stay true to who we are, make good decisions, get the ball to high percentage areas. DeVoe and Usher are really, really good players. And obviously it's a team that won the ACC tournament last year, and those two guys and specifically were double-digit scorers on that team. So, but I think the biggest thing is, it's the first time for the most part, other than maybe Tyler and Brad, that we've seen a high dose of what the Princeton does.
Andy?
Greg, you've had much has been made about last year's team and its veteran element, this team being the opposite of that. But is this team mature in ways that maybe we don't see? Have you had a chance to kind of gauge that?
Yeah, I think, sometimes we try to judge maturity based on what the year says in the program. And I mentioned earlier with Chucky starting a couple weeks ago that freshmen or younger players playing a bigger role than maybe what they did or when they did it 20 years ago isn't as dramatic of a leap as what it was, just because of the exposure and the other experiences they get before they come to college. So I think it's been a collective group or collective maturity with this group. And I think two guys that have helped it, obviously Brad, Tyler, Johnny, guys that have had experience, but I'd never want to underestimate the value of Chris Vogt and Jacoby Neath. And it's not in points or what shows on a stat sheet, but it's 4 years of experience for Chris and 2 for Jacoby that I think have helped, just help settle our locker room, help balance our locker room a little bit. And so those guys' voice from the experiences they've had have helped our younger guys maybe expedite their maturity process too. But also I don't really have, at least when I'm around them, I don't see immaturity. We have a couple team clowns, but in terms of they take their work very seriously. They come to practice. Knock on wood, we haven't had a bad practice, and that's where it starts. The team's only going to be as good as you practice, and they understand the value that we need out of practice every day.
Jeff?
Greg, I know it's early, but there's some games Tyler Wall has had a really good stat line, lots of everything. Other games, not so much, but put a value on what he's done defensively so far.
Well, told him 2 years ago I thought he could be the best defensive player in the Big Ten, and that was trying to, over the last 2 years, find an identity for him on that team with so many older guys. But now I think we've seen, what he can do. He's so versatile. He's stronger now. And obviously the one thing that helps him the most is the experience. He's switching on to point guards. He's switching on to, he really did a great job on Fotu in the second half on Wednesday. So just the versatility combined with how he's improved his body, plus the experience that he's gained over the last 2 years, give him a lot of confidence defensively.
Abby?
You mentioned Jacoby Neath. Do you have any updates on him? Do you anticipate him playing this week?
He returned to practice yesterday in a limited role, so I think we're going to increase that role today, or the amount today. So it's trending the right way. I don't know for sure if he'll play on Wednesday night or not. It'll depend largely on what happens today and tomorrow.
Andy?
Greg, since you opened the door, could you identify the clowns that you have in your locker room?
They probably all take turns being Carter Gilmore's probably 1 and 1A though, in terms of team jokester. They tell me Lauren Bowman is really funny too when he gets around just the guys. So, I think everybody takes turns, keeping guys loose, which is important. We need to have fun with it. They need to have fun. And I think this group has done a really good job of having fun with it. They enjoy, like I mentioned in the opening, they enjoy being around each other. They enjoy, the teamwork and everybody just doing their part to help our team. And I think that's been a really neat thing from a coaching staff standpoint, to watch a group come together from all different places and then kind of grow up as we speak.
Jeff?
Greg, with the transfer portal now, guys can come and go as they please, maybe not get enough playing time. You had a couple guys recently decide to redshirt. Now, there's no guarantee they're going to be here 5 years, but how do you hope or expect that their decisions will benefit them in the long run?
Well, I think one thing is you listen to them and their reasonings and logic behind it and what they envisioned for the future. And both those guys, both Chris and Matthew, are very mature for their age in terms of how they look at their college career. They're fortunately, I've been very fortunate to coach unselfish guys that aren't caught up in instant gratification. And both of those guys talked about how they could improve over the course of time and looked at it in the long game sense. So, knowing academically how long they're going to be here, what degree can they get? Can they work on their masters? We talked through all that, how they can change themselves and improve themselves physically. In Chris's instance, he missed his whole senior year and didn't play in the summer prior of AAU just because of the implications of COVID and the risk of COVID with the family members. So I think for him, it was very logical just to try to catch up on some of the experience component. And I think Matthew saw that how he can continue to improve and change and grow his game and grow his body, that it made both of them, I thought, were very logical in their reasonings and questions behind it, and that's what they decided to do.
Abby?
Coach, you've earned 2 big accolades today. You're ranked 23rd, and Johnny Davis was just named Big Ten Player of the Week. Can you comment on what it means for your team to be ranked so early, and what you specifically have seen Johnny for him to get all the success that's being thrown his way right now?
Yeah, be honest with you, Abby, we never really care about the rankings, and it's great for fans, alumni, all that. It's not going to change how we approach today. It shouldn't change how we work. So that's an outside perspective. So it's great and everything, but it really has no value from a standpoint of how we have to approach today, and Georgia Tech is not going to care. And from Johnny's standpoint, I've said many times, he said it to me this summer, that, Coach, I don't care about the individual stuff. I just want to win. I want to help our team win. So it's great. Obviously, he had a terrific week in Vegas. And now he'll see maybe a different approach from opponents too. He's going to be, highlighted, and there's more film on him. So he's going to have to continue to improve and be more consistent and, just continue to grow his game. But he won't really get too wound up in individual player of the week. As long as we have the team of the week each week, that's more important to him.
Zach?
Greg, after the win in the Maui tournament, you said something about a PhD. I think it poor, hungry, driven. Could you just explain that, and why is that mindset so important, especially coming off that performance?
Well, I think you want to keep a mindset that we haven't accomplished anything yet. We still have a long ways to go. We have to improve in a lot of areas. So just keeping that mindset of, that's an old one I didn't invent that saying, but just stay hungry, stay driven, stay motivated. Yesterday I did a little after film. I had 2 plates set in front of me, and I went around to each guy, and we put up on our smartboard in our film room, give me your favorite food that would encompass a healthy meal. And they went through from broccoli, Brussels sprouts, carrots, apples, you name it, grilled chicken, salmon. So I said, okay, there's that. You have a choice of this meal. And then I took the other plate, and I have a big bowl I always pull out for, you guys don't get to visit my office anymore because of COVID, but Halloween time, I always fill it up with candy, and I have like bags and bags and bags. It's a spot to be around Halloween. It's still full. So I filled up my pockets in my sweatshirt with candy yesterday, and they didn't know it. And so I said, all right, you've got this invisible healthy meal. And then I took all that candy and threw it on the other plate. I said, here's your choice. What happens when you eat all this candy? And I asked, I don't know who it was, Stephen Crow, and he goes, yeah, you get a sugar high. I said, you're right. What happens after the sugar wears off? You crash. So we have to make sure, just from a mindset, we're always focused on the healthy meal. Don't let Vegas become the plate of candy. We can't have a sugar high off of what happened in Las Vegas. That's in the rearview mirror. We got to focus on the things that will make us the best team going forward. So I think they got it. It took me 2 days to dream that one up, as we had a couple days off. So I thought, how can I make sure we don't, enjoy that, what we did. We celebrated in the locker room. They dumped 50 gallons of water on me. That big silver thing that they gave us, they had that thing full of water. And Chris Vogt was standing on a chair. So he's 7'1", and he's on a chair. I got every drop of it. But I want him to celebrate those moments. But then, all right, we've had 3 days here to kind of flush that, and now we're moving on to Georgia Tech.
Jeff?
You mentioned both Crowell and Vogt, and they've had some games where they've gotten in early foul trouble, probably for different reasons. Have you guys been able to identify some things and show them, okay, if you do this, you're going to get in foul trouble, or you've got to do this to avoid it, to help them in the future? Yeah,
we've talked about it even before. I think they both had 2 on Wednesday, just showing there are going to be some that are going to happen. The game is physical. They're in a position where, as a 5, a lot of times they're in ball screen defense positions, so sometimes they get caught and they're a little bit on ice skates with a guard coming at them, and there are those type of bang plays. But the ones that I always clip out are the ones where they're grabbing an arm and trying to rip through and trying to point out those type of things. If they break the plane, they think they're chested up, and really they've broken the plane. So show them that on film. In the moment they think, Coach, I stayed straight up, and I'm like, well, I'll show you the film. And no, you didn't. But so just trying to show them. I think they always learn best from seeing themselves on film. And we even had one of Stevens yesterday, where he had basically gave the guy a big Thanksgiving hug. I said, that's a foul. You got to swim your way around. Then I had an example of Tyler doing it the right way and stealing it on a post-entry play from Fotu in the second half. So we kind of how not to and how to.
Okay. Last one, Abby?
Greg, your team announced their new uniforms today. I was wondering if you had any thoughts on the player design uniforms. Do you like them? Do you not? Where do they lay in rankings? And just what are your thoughts?
I always leave those opportunities up to the players. So when Under Armour came to us, I don't know, over a year ago, and I said, hey, whatever, let's get with the players and see what they want. I threw out different ideas. I like the Bucky that ended up being on the shorts. and I think it's a back tag too. The checkerboard back from the late 70s, early 80s. They use that some, so it's kind of a mix. But like I said, picked out the older guys and then we knew we had a couple younger guys coming in. I think Chucky was involved maybe, or Lauren. Let them design. Hopefully we play well in them. That's all really I'm concerned about. And we'll use them as an alternate. I don't know when, but here and there. So it's always, that generation is very much into the attire and the gear. So we aren't going to have 8 or 9 like Oregon, but the one is fine, and they did a good job with it.